Good morning. This is Scott Jorgens from Endeavour Solutions. We're talking today about advanced bank reconciliation with Microsoft Dynamics GP and showing a quick compare and contrast. Happy to have Aurelis from Nolan joining us on the call. For those that are new to Endeavour, we've been around for over 25 years now, 3 lines of business: advisory services, implementation and support for Dynamics GP, Dynamics CRM, and Office 365, and ongoing optimization and support for our clients. We now have over 450 active clients across Canada and parts of the US, core offices in Toronto and Halifax, as well as remote offices in Montreal, London, and Edmonton. We look forward to working with each of you on the line, and feel free to ask questions in the chat or reach out to Endeavour, either your consultants or our sales and client support team at the end of this webinar. So our agenda for today is going to be mostly held by Aurelis, talking about the goal of advanced bank reconciliation, when it's a good fit, GP versus Nolan and the added features, an overview of the Nolan advanced bank reconciliation, Timesaving features, and then she's going to get into a quick demo. So Aurelis, over to you. I'll let you introduce yourself and take it from here.
Good morning. My name is Aurelis Fontanes. I work for Nolan. I'm going to be presenting advanced bank reconciliation, also known as ABR. And the goal of ABR is to auto-match as many transactions as possible. And we're going to accomplish that by amount and by creating reconciliation rules by transaction type. And when I say transaction type, I mean like a bank fee is a different transaction type, an AP check is a transaction type, or a deposit. So you can create different rules for each transaction type. And as a result, the reconciliation time can come down from hours to minutes. Who would need ABR? So ABR is a good fit for companies that either have a high transaction volume, like restaurants and retailers, or that have multiple bank accounts or multiple GL cash accounts, and also deal with credit card transactions. Also, if in your bank statement you have deposits that are summarized, you might need deposit groups on the GL side. And if you need to process cash transactions outside of GP, then you can import that transaction as a GL entry, and you will be able to reconcile that transaction using Nolan ABR. In addition, if you need to pay your vendors by ACH, EFT, or wires, then ABR is a good fit for you. Okay, so what is the main difference between Nolan ABR and GP reconciliation tool? And I think that it is that we don't care about the checkbook IDs, because we're going to be linking the bank account number to one or more GL cash accounts. It can be any GL account, but most times it will be a cash account. What this really means is that in GP, you're limited to only using the bank transaction and the bank transfer windows in order to have those transactions available to reconcile in GP. However, if you're using Nolan, you can do any kind of transaction, and you will be able to reconcile that transaction using the ABR window because the transactions will be posted to the GL. Since we don't care about the checkbook IDs, you don't need to maintain a checkbook balance. And also, you can define a specific reconciliation rules, as I mentioned before. I have an example here for transaction types, AP check. You can say that the amount and the check number must agree. Or for deposits, you can say that the amount and the date have to agree. Or for transfers, you can use the reference. So if you have something useful in the reference field on the bank statement that you also have on the GL side, we can use that as well. I will be talking about tolerance values or percentage at the end, but what that really means is that you can have a transaction of different amounts and still be a match. Throughout my demo, I will be pointing out the main differences between regular GP and Nolan. Most people, they think that the main difference are that you can use multiple GL accounts. In GP, you cannot do that, so you can link many GL cash accounts to one bank account. Also, you can use a CSV file, a comma-separated file. You have advanced reconciliation rules, and you can do deposit grouping. Some time-saving features is like the auto post. I really like that one because out of the bank statement, you can identify the transaction types for which you want the system to auto-create transactions for you on the GL side. So it will create the transaction on the GL side, will post it, and it will auto-match the transaction against the bank statement side. Also, when you open the reconciliation window, you will be able to auto-extract the transactions from the GL side, and you will be able to reconcile transactions on the GL side against the bank statement side without the need of checkbook IDs. As I mentioned before, you can set up reconciliation rules, but they can be set up either company-wide or you can set them up by bank account. So you can have some rules that applies to bank account number 1, but it doesn't apply to bank account number 2. Or you can have a reconciliation rule that applies to all bank accounts that you have in the system. And deposit groups. As mentioned before, if you have many transactions on the GL side that appear as only one transaction on the bank statement, we have the ability to group them together as just one deposit group. You will also have access to multiple reports. We have about 10 of them. I will show you a couple. If by any reason you make a mistake and you need to unreconcile, you have the ability to unreconcile transactions, to unreconcile reconciliations in ABR. And if you need, also you can verify if a check number cleared the bank by using our inquiry window. And reconciliation rules that you can set up by tolerance values, and I will show you that in the demo. Okay, so let's get to it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Aurelis.
You're welcome. Okay, so let me just start off by showing you one bank account setup window. So I will go to the reconciliation, but I will be reconciling today for Wells Fargo. And if you see in this window, what I'm doing here is that I'm linking the bank account number to one GL cash account. Okay, so I don't need checkbook IDs. In this case, I have one checkbook ID because I already had checkbooks in my system, but you don't need it. I can add a different account number here if I wanted to. So I can have multiple GL accounts linked to the same bank account number. Or if you take a look at my other bank account, the one for Visa credit card, I don't have any checkbook ID in here. So you can either link it if you already have checkbook IDs, however, it will not update them, or you can just have the GL accounts linked to the bank account number directly. So let's start the process. I will be reconciling for Wells Fargo for March. I will go to Transactions, ABR, and by the way, all of our menus are going to be under Financial. And Reconcile Bank Transaction, that's our main window. I will select my operating account for Wells Fargo, this one. And this is what I mentioned before. If I want to extract the transactions for the GL, this is the auto extract. I will say yes. And that will extract transactions on the left-hand side of this window up to the end of March. So everything that is outstanding for Wells Fargo will appear on my left-hand side. From 2014, I have some really old transactions, up to the 31st. Okay. So now I will need my bank statement transactions For that, I will go to Routines, ABR, Statement Import, Statement Import. I keep clicking something different here. And I will select the one for Wells Fargo. And I'm mentioning Wells Fargo and not the bank account because you can import more than one bank account at the same time if they are in the same bank statement. So you can have multiple bank accounts in the same bank statement and then import them all at the same time. It knows the location. That's something that I do beforehand in the setup. I will click Import. And once it is complete, I can go back to the main reconciliation window. Let's close this out. And I will just hit redisplay, and now I will see a nice side-by-side comparison between the bank statement on the right-hand side and then my GL transactions on the left-hand side. What else you can see here? You can see the book balance up here, statement ending balance, and a difference. And if you click on the blue arrow, you can see more details. Inside the grid, you have a transaction date, reference, amount. You can also see the check number or document number. And we have a match column that has zeros, but that will change when I click Propose. And Propose will auto-match transactions by amount and by my reconciliation rules. However, if you take a closer look, you will see that there's one transaction that already has a match number assigned to it, number 2, even though I didn't click Propose. And this is a special rule that I created in my system that recognizes specific transaction types. In this case, transaction type 698 that refers to bank fees. So every time that it sees a bank fee, it auto-creates the GL transaction for me, and then it posts the transaction on the GL side and matches the two transactions together. And that's why it has a number 2. How does the system do that? If I go to Setup, I can show you by going to the Import Format Definition how that is created. So let me also bring in my bank statement and put this side by side. Here. Okay, so this window, I use it to identify where the information that I need is located within the bank statement file. So my transaction date, in my case, is in the first column, so that's why I have it here, number 1. Debits and credit are 12 and 13, these 2. And then type, remember that I said that I create reconciliation rules per transaction type. That's number 10, of course, the one that I have highlighted. When I click on the blue arrow, that I can tell the system for transaction type 698, go ahead and post it to this account. So you can auto-create as many transactions as possible by transaction type, but most people, they use it for bank fees, interest revenue, or any other type of transaction that they have on the bank statement side that they haven't posted on the GL side yet. So let's close this out. So I will go back to my main window. And at this point, I will just go ahead and click Propose. And Propose will assign match numbers to most of my transactions. And I can either display all of them or just the one that did match. And I can sort this out by transaction date, by reference, by amount, or by match number. And if I want to, I can verify if it follows my rules. I do have a rule in my system that says that for AP checks, BAI code 475, the amounts and the check numbers have to agree. So in my case here, they do. So let's see what didn't match. So I have 3 transactions on my bank statement side that didn't match. First one, this is a bank fee too. However, I changed the number to $6.99 instead of $6.98, so the system would not recognize that it was a bank fee. So you can see how you can deal with transactions that do not exist on the GL side and for which you didn't let the system auto-create the transaction for you. So in this case, I don't have the transaction on the GL side, so what I will do is that I can create a GL transaction on the fly by clicking here, create GL transaction. I will just type in bank fees, Endeavour. It will know the cash account that is going to and the amount. All you have to do is to type in, or you can look it up, the account for bank fees. Okay. I will go ahead and post it. And this will update the GL. Right here. So this is bank fees, so I have a credit to cash and a debit to bank fees. And it will also update my reconciliation window. So I don't have to extract my transactions. It will be here at the end. Okay. So at this point, I can go ahead and click propose, and propose will assign a match number to the transactions. So I will change my view to match, and it assigned number 15. So what else did it match? So here I have an AP check. If I take a look to my left-hand side, I can see that amount here. However, they did not match. And the reason why is because I have a rule that says that for AP checks, the amounts have to agree, but also the check numbers have to agree. In this case, they are similar. They are not exactly the same because on the GL side has a leading 0, and then on the bank statement side has 2 zeros at the end. If I know that this will be the case from now on, I can change the rule. In my case, this is an exception, so I will not change it, but if you need to, you can easily do so. You can go to the setup, ABR, and then reconcile rules. I will look up the one that I have for AP checks, that one. And this is saying, take a look at the check number from characters 1 through 99 in both the bank statement and in GP, but you can change it so it goes from 1 to 5, for example, and then from 2 to 6 in Dynamics GP, so it ignores the leading 0. For AP checks, that's enough. I mean, the check number and the amount. But for other types of transactions, you can use the date. And you can say, for example, that the transactions have to be -1 and 2 days within each other. Or if you have something useful in the reference field, you can use that as well. Or you can use the source document in GP. In this case, you can say that for AP checks, the transactions have to come only from computer checks. So if you have the same transaction, but it doesn't come from computer checks, then it will not be a match. If you have many transactions that they are the same amount, I highly recommend creating reconciliation rules. Otherwise, you can also say manually match. So that means that the system will take the transactions that are the same amount and will put them in a different window so you can deal with those transactions separately. And in the PowerPoint, I mentioned tolerance values. So what that really means is that, for example, sometimes you have a transaction net of fees on the bank statement, but you have that transaction as a gross amount on the GL side. So you can have 100 on the GL and then 99 on the bank statement because you have a $1 fee. You can have tolerance values, let's say of $5, and the transactions can still be a match. Where will the difference go? It will go to an account that you put in the setup, in this case, my bank fees account. Okay, and this rule can be set up by transaction type or company-wide. Okay, so let's go back to my main window. And since this transaction that doesn't meet my rules, if I click propose, nothing will happen. However, if the total mark is the same, I can go ahead and click match. So this is a manual match. And now it assigned number 16. Okay, so last one. When you have a deposit that is summarized on the bank statement side, but that is actually made up of it's made up of many transactions on the GL side. In my case, I have 3 transactions. So I can either look them up if I know what I'm looking for, and just click and just select many to one and click match. However, that's not always an option because you don't know what you're looking for. So that's option number 1. Option number 2, you don't have to check any boxes if you have many transactions on the GL side against one transaction on the bank statement side. You can click on consolidate. And consolidate is a filter. So let's type in consolidate. And if we assume that we don't know what we're looking for, I will use the date from the bank statement and the amount. And I will have all of my outstanding GL transactions down here. When I click on restricted, I can filter by transaction date, amount, reference, or check number, or by a combination. So if I use the date, and I will use a date range, I can select all of those transactions, add them up. That's not what I want, so I can, at this point, I can review the transaction, and if I need to remove some of them, I can do so here. At this point, I can go ahead and save it. And when I go back to my main window, those transactions will be consolidated into just one for reconciliation purposes. So right here. At this point, I can go ahead and click propose, and propose will assign a match number to that deposit. There is a third option, and the third option is even easier than the consolidation. And if you take a look at transaction at match number 11, this one right here, it looks like a one-to-one match. However, I know it is not a one-to-one match because of the description that I see here on the GL side. And if I want to see the transactions on that grouping, I can click here, GP transactions. And I can easily see that the 44,000 is made up of 3 different transactions, not only one. But the system was able to group them together for me by looking at the date. They all have the same date. And by looking at one field that I specify in my system, in this case, the reference field, and only the first 5 characters. So as long as the reference and the date are the same, the system will group them together as just one transaction, and then match the total against the bank statement side. And that's what we call a deposit group. And I don't know if you noticed, but we have happy hour for 22,000.
That's quite a happy hour.
Yes.
Aurelis,
Yes.
can you also talk to if someone has another system that's doing their cash transactions and they import it in, how it looks like on this screen?
Yeah. So if transactions are coming from a system outside of GP, they will most likely come in as a GL transaction, so it will post directly to the GL. That doesn't work if you're using regular GP's reconciliation tool because you will not be able to reconcile those transactions. If you're using Nolan, since we link the bank account number to the GL account, you will be able to reconcile it directly because everything that went through that cash account will appear here, like it is my case, as you can see. So if I have a transaction that hit the GL and that transaction had, in this example, this cash account, that transaction will appear in this window, even if it comes from an outside system.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so I just showed you an easy example of deposit groups, but it can be more complicated depending on how you enter the information on the GL side. So I just wanted to quickly show you the setup for deposit groups to let you know that you can create as many deposit groups as you may need. For example, I have one for AR transactions that groups by cash receipt type and then credit card ID. And the one that I just used is for the GL transactions, and it's grouping by the reference field and only the characters 1 through 5. But I can group by something specific if I needed to, and I can group by ACH transactions or EFT transactions and so on. Okay. Also, you don't have to use the reference field. You can use any of the fields that we have here. So if you're putting the transactions together in the same batch on the GL side, then the audit trail code might work for you, or the source document, check number, or any of the others that we have here, including batch ID. Okay. You can also decide what information is coming in for the grouping. For example, for my GL grouping, I'm saying nothing will come from sales. That's why I don't have any box checked. The boxes, the information that will come from financial and only from bank transaction entry and GL entry windows. Okay, so you can be really specific as to what you want to group depending on how you enter the information on the GL side. So let's go back. So at this point, if you notice, my difference came down to 0, so I can reconcile. I can also, and I didn't mention this before, I can reconcile daily, weekly, monthly, or however frequent you want. And I can even close out of this window and come back later. I can import more transactions, extract more transactions, and then the transactions that are already matched will keep the match number. So you can match daily and reconcile monthly, and or you can use many combinations as you may need. So let's go ahead and reconcile. Okay, so this is one of the reports that we provide. This is telling you the transactions that did match, and it is assigning a reconciliation number to this reconciliation, and in this case it is number 2. We're going to use this number if by any reason we need to unreconcile. So next one will be the closing balance report. First, you will have a summary, and it will let you know how many outstanding checks and deposits you have. In my case, I have 12 and 13. And it will also give you the other basic information for the reconciliation. If you scroll down to the second page, you will be able to see the details of those outstanding checks and deposits. Let's close this out. So if you want to verify if a check number cleared the bank, you can easily go to Inquiry, ABR, check Inquiry, and then you can type in the check number, click Find, and if it has a match number, and in this case it does, it means that it matched and that it cleared the bank. It also tells you that it came from statement number 2, that's the bank statement, and if you want to see the bank statement, you can click here, and that will show you the bank statement side GP, including the transaction that we were looking for, that one. So it has the date, reference type, and then the amounts. Let's close this out. If you want to print an actual report, we have a report section that you can have access to right here, ABR, and we have about 10 reports, including the one that I showed you before, the closing balance and even closing balance history. You can go back to any given point in time. or even age transactions, which I really like. So let's show you one. So this one I really like it because I think it's really useful. I'm also an accountant, and this one will tell you how long a transaction has been outstanding. And I define periods in my case that you can change. In my case, it goes from 1 to 30, 31 to 60, 61 to 90, and over 90 days. So if I need to write off transactions that are really old, I will concentrate on the ones over 90. In my case, this section right here, and they're really, really old from 2014. Yep. Let's close that out. If you need to unreconcile for any reason, you can do so. You can go to Utilities, ABR, Unreconcile Transactions, select the bank account that you want to unreconcile, and then the reconciliation number that the system gave you before, in this case number 2. So you will go from number 2 to number 2 and then unreconcile. Okay. So let me go through some setups. So at this point, the reconciliation process is complete. Some other setups I mentioned in the report that I just showed you, that you can change the aging periods. You can do so here, or you can add more periods if you needed to. You can also define where the information comes from on the GL side in the reference. So in my case, it comes from the GL reference header, but it can also come from the reference line. So that's the distribution reference line, or the GL account description. You can also disallow a user from reconciling if the difference is not 0. And we can also handle multi-currency. I mentioned before during the PowerPoint slide that you can set up reconciliation rules per bank account or company-wide. If you want to set them up by bank account, you can come to the bank account setup and then assign the reconciliation rule specifically to that bank account. All of this time I have been mentioning a CSV file or comma separated file, but we can also use a BAI or BAI2 file. In that case, those files are predefined, so you don't have many setups to do. And most of them are already in the system, like the transaction types. We have the format options in case that you have more than one bank account in the same file. We can define that information here. And the other one is to set up the currency. In this case, it could be Canadian or US dollars. Yep. So that's an overview of ABR. Let me know if you have any questions or comments.
I don't see anything in the question window, so I think we're good to wrap up. Could you put back up the PowerPoint, and then we'll wrap up the day.
Okay.
So thanks very much, Aurelis. Next slide. Next steps, having seen today's webinar on advanced bank reconciliation, I just need to ask yourself where you're starting from and where you're looking to go. Definitely a lot of time-saving tips and tools. So reach out to either your Endeavour consultants who are working with you on a day-to-day basis, or contact our sales team led by Steve Ewing, and happy to talk more about your needs and talk about Nolan Advanced Bank Reconciliation to help with your bank recs, as well as it does serve as a good integration tool for transactions that may be coming in from other systems, ultimately around those cash payments or cash receipts. So thank you very much, everyone. We're going to wrap up a little bit less than 10 minutes early, and that will provide you some extra time back to your day. Have a great day. Thank you very much.